Welcome to Vouchers, Subsidies, and SOI. Oh my! An insightful panel discussion brought to you by the Greater Providence Board of Realtors Housing Opportunities Committee. I'm delighted to be your moderator for this 2-hour event. My name is John Dolan, and I'm honored to serve as a director on the Greater Providence Board of Directors and as vice chair for the Greater Providence Board Housing Opportunities Committee. During our time together, we will explore various aspects of the real estate landscape, focusing on navigating subsidies, source of income discrimination laws, Section 8 vouchers, and homeownership guidelines. Our panelists today are experts in their respective fields and will provide invaluable insights into these topics. Allow me to introduce our distinguished panelists. Beginning to my right, we have Michael Dichiaro, Director of Leased Housing and Rental Services at Rhode Island Housing. Michael has been at Rhode Island Housing for 28 years and has held roles of increasing responsibility before being appointed to his current position in June 2022. Michael is responsible for oversight of the physical and financial condition of Rhode Island Housing's multifamily rental portfolio and leads a team that monitors compliance with various federal and state programs used to finance and support rental developments throughout Rhode Island, including the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, HOME, and HUD's Project-Based Rental Assistance. In addition, Michael oversees the corporation's Housing Choice Voucher Program, providing rental subsidies to individuals and families in 20 cities and towns throughout Rhode Island. To his right, we have Michael Crane, Esquire. Michael is a Rhode Island and Massachusetts attorney since 2007. He is a solo practitioner with a primary focus on private and subsidized housing matters that affect landlords and tenants throughout southern New England. He represents numerous housing authorities and subsidized housing providers and advises on a wide variety of housing matters that arise daily. To my left, we have Reinaldo Gonzalez, housing counselor at Providence Housing Authority. Reinaldo's role as a housing counselor makes him an invaluable resource for clients seeking assistance with housing opportunities. He will provide insights into the Section 8 approval process, voucher requirements, and the assistance available throughout Rhode Island. To his left, we have Peter Pagonis, Director of Home Ownership at the Rhode Island Housing. Peter was appointed Rhode Island Housing's Director of Home Ownership in 2015. In this role, he oversees the corporation's home ownership and foreclosure prevention programs. Prior to joining Rhode Island Housing, Mr. Pagonis worked as a business development advisor with the United States Peace Corps in Leon, Nicaragua. Mr. Pagonis has held various positions in banking, including corporate and investment banking associate at Fleet Boston Financial and loan officer at Bank of America. With our panel of experts, we aim to provide you with a comprehensive understanding of the challenges and opportunities associated with these topics. Our goal is to equip you with knowledge and resources necessary to assist your clients effectively and ethically. Throughout the discussion, we encourage you, the audience, to participate. Please feel free to raise your hands if you have questions and wish to engage the panelists. Without further ado, let us embark on this enlightening journey of vouchers, subsidies, and SOI. Oh my! I now invite our first panelist, Michael Dichiaro, to share your expertise and provide us with a comprehensive understanding of vouchers. Please explain what voucher entails, its purpose, and how it functions within the realm of housing assistance. We are eager to learn about the practical application of vouchers and how they can benefit both tenants and landlords.
Great, thank you, John, and it's a pleasure to be here. One quick fact, I'm a member of the Greater Providence Board of Realtors. I have been for 20-something years, and I've never sold a property. I've held my license for a long time, but kept it at bay. So thank you all for joining. It's a pleasure to be here again. So vouchers, the Housing Choice Voucher Program, it's a HUD program administered through their Office of Public and Indian Housing. They allocate funds throughout the country to public housing agencies. Rhode Island Housing is one of them. Reinaldo and Providence Housing is another. Each individual city and town, if they have their own housing authority, they would administer this program in their community. Rhode Island Housing has statewide jurisdiction. So for those, it's actually 18 jurisdictions that don't have a housing authority. Rhode Island Housing administers the vouchers in those towns. Typically the suburban areas, Foster, Situate, Jamestown, not the inner city cities and towns, most of them have their own housing authority. So statewide, there are, I have the number here somewhere, about 9,000 vouchers currently being leased in Rhode Island, which is a great number. The program really assists folks that are making less than 50% of area median income. They would apply through a wait list. We have Rhode Island Housing maintains a centralized wait list. I think there are 32 housing authorities that participate, or communities that participate in that wait list. A resident or an applicant would go online. Very easy process. They put their name on, they put their income levels. It's all self-certification initially. They would check preferences. So every community has a number of preferences. For example, Rhode Island Housing, our highest point preference is for folks in our jurisdiction. So we have a mandate from HUD to spend as much money as we can within that jurisdiction, as much as they give us. It's called the budget authority. So we try to maximize our budget authority. By doing that, they have to live in one of those communities that we can administer the voucher. So one of our top priorities is living in that community. We also have a homeless preference, a preference for individuals fleeing domestic violence. And I think we have another one for folks leaving a program, a subsidized program that's expiring. So those are our preferences. Every housing authority has their own preferences. Individual would apply to the wait list. When their name gets pulled, right now we're pulling 100 names per month. Once those names get pulled, top of the list, our staff goes through and then actually qualifies them. So out of the 100 that put themselves on a list, a number of them drop off because you may not be able to find contact information on them. They may be over income. Again, that initial application to the wait list is really self-certification. Once we dig deeper, some of them fall off. The ones that qualify, we would give them a voucher, and they would have initially 90 days to find an apartment to use that voucher. And what the voucher does is basically cover the difference between what they're going to pay, which is 30% of their income, and the rent in that unit. And I know there are probably, and we'll talk about it later, there are concerns with landlords sometimes about how much can they get. Can we match the rent that they're getting in the private market? And for the most part, we can. Our budget authority allows us to pay up to 120% of area median income. So the rent is not too far off from what private landlords are getting. I can give you a couple examples. A 3-bedroom in Hopkinton, for example, it's about $2,300 a month. A 3-bedroom in Newport, $3,200 a month. So pretty good rents. We are required to do a rent reasonableness test. So when a resident finds an apartment, the landlord would send us a request for tenant approval. We would look at that apartment, look at the proposed rent, make sure it's reasonable. We have software that'll look at that address, do a comp study in the area, let us know if that rent is reasonable. If it's within that 120% of AMI and the rent's reasonable, we would do an inspection, issue a voucher, sign a contract with the landlord, and the landlord would get payments from Rhode Island Housing or from any other housing authority on a monthly basis. Again, the difference between that 30% of the individual's income or family's income and the rent. The landlord's still responsible for collecting rent, the tenant's portion of the rent from them, and we would pay them directly as part of the subsidy. Waiting list, I talked about it a little earlier. There are 23, so we maintain, again, a centralized wait list with 31 communities. There were 23,000 folks on that wait list right now. I think in the news in the past, you've heard questions about how long is someone on the wait list for, how long does it take to get pulled? It really depends on the preferences. Overall, we did an analysis a few weeks ago, and it sounds like a long time, but it's about 3 years on average for someone to get pulled from a wait list. But I can tell you, speaking from Rhode Island Housing's perspective, if you are living in one of our communities, you're probably going to get pulled from that wait list within 12 months. So again, each housing authority has their own preferences, but on average, throughout the whole state, it's about 3 years. I can't speak for others who have different preferences or may not pull as frequently as we do. We, again, pull 100 names per month. That's a good overview about your program. Should we take questions as we go?
If there are any questions, again, feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, we can move on to the next. Yes, go ahead.
Do veterans have a priority?
For Rhode Island Housing, they don't, but I can't speak again. Other housing authorities could make a preference for veterans, for sure. Yeah.
So, Michael, in these leases, are they usually like year leases? I mean, what happens if the
landlord wants to negotiate the raise the rent, how does that work with the voucher? As long as the percentages are met and the income is met?
Right, as long as the total rent doesn't exceed that, our payment standard, what we can pay. It's typically a 1-year lease. You enter a 1-year lease. Again, if the resident does not perform, either by not paying their rent or by, something else that's, an eviction-worthy event. This certainly, we don't require that person stays there all year. People get evicted. I will say that we did an analysis about a year ago about our residents that are living in units, and the eviction rate is far less than the state average. So most of these folks know what they have, they know it's gold, and they don't want to risk it. They don't want to risk losing their voucher. So we have very few problems with residents.
I'm sorry. Is the inspection process, is it initially that one inspection, or is it?
It's an initial inspection, then we have to go out at least once every 2 years. Yeah. Again, unless there's a complaint, if there are issues that are brought up, we find out about a minimum housing violation, we'll go out and see what's going on.
Are the residents responsible for the deposit and whatever other money?
Typically, yes. We'll talk about it later. So Rhode Island Housing offers some landlord incentives. So HUD, Rhode Island Housing administers this program for HUD. They also provide us with service fee and administrative fee. We can use that fee to incentivize landlords to participate. And I think there's a handout that talks about the incentives. Yeah, so for a new landlord, the first unit they lease up, they'll get $2,000 from us. And then $500 for every additional unit. We also offer residents up to $1,500 towards their security deposit. And in that brochure too, there's like $2,000 that we'll pay towards repairs. So if we go out and do that initial inspection and find out there are some minor repairs that need to be done, the landlord will get an estimate, let us know, we can pay up to $2,000 to get that unit ready.
Thank you, Michael. Next up, I'm going to have Reinaldo share some information about the requirements for the submission process. What are the key steps involved in submitting an application for vouchers or subsidies? What are the necessary documents and forms? And what timelines or challenges can applicants expect? Your insights will provide valuable guidance for realtors in assisting their clients.
Okay. Once again, I'm Reinaldo with the Providence Housing Authority. I'm just going to give down a breakdown of how the process works for the homeownership basics. Under the Housing Choice Voucher, the homeownership program, low-income family can use federal housing assistance to purchase and build equity in a home of their own. The Housing Choice Voucher homeownership, the Home Choice Voucher homeownership program is more accurately described as a homeownership option in the Housing Choice Voucher program. What is the difference between the base voucher program has the option to allow families to use their voucher assistance to purchase rather than lease a home. The Home Choice Voucher program is not independent from the Home Choice Voucher. Rather, it is considered a special housing type permitted under the PHA Housing Choice Voucher program. Homeownership Voucher Assistant is a tenant-based assistant. This means that the homeownership voucher participant may purchase an eligible unit anywhere they wish within the PHA jurisdiction. In addition, homeownership voucher household may, in certain instances, transfer to another PHA that is also operating an Home Choice Voucher homeownership program if that PHA is accepting new participants into the program. Participants' families have the primary responsibility for finding eligible units to purchase and for securing finances. Only families who are otherwise eligible to receive assistance under the Housing Choice Voucher program may exercise the homeownership option. Current voucher program participants who are eligible to end their lease, in addition to the family basic eligibility for housing voucher assistance families admitted to the Home Choice Voucher homeownership program, must meet additional requirements. They must qualify as first-time home buyers, meet income, employment, and other eligible standards, and complete the homeownership counseling program. To meet the first-time home buyer eligibility requirement, a family must be one of the following: a first-time homeowner, a cooperative member, or a family of which a family member is a person with disabilities in use of the homeownership option is needed as reasonable accommodation. A first-time home buyer is a family of which no member owned and any present ownership interest in a residence of any family member during the 3 years before commencement of the home ownership assistance for the family. The term first-time homeowner includes a single parent or a displaced homemaker who, while married, owned a home with his or her spouse or resides in a home owned by his or her spouse. A cooperative member is a family of which one or more members owns membership to a cooperative member. Cooperative member is a family of which one membership shares cooperative. Minimum income requirements. At the time the family begins receiving homeownership assistance, the adult family member of a non-disabled family who will own the home must collectively meet a minimum non-welfare annual income requirement that is not less than the federal minimum hourly wage, 7.25 in 2022 multiplied by 2,000 hours, which comes out to 14,500. For a disabled family, a family whose head of spouse or sole member is a person with disability, the adult family member who will own the home must have an annual income that is not less than the monthly federal supplement Social Security income, which is SSI benefits. For an individual living alone, $841 per month in 2022 multiplied by 12 comes up to $10,092. Minimum income eligibility only applies when determining if the family meets the requirement to participate in the homeownership option. PHA may establish income requirements higher than the HUD standard for either or both types of families, disabled or non-disabled, based on factors such as local house costs and the practices of local lenders. However, families that meet the requirement shall nevertheless be considered to meet the income requirements in the following considerations are met. The family demonstrate that it has been pre-qualified or pre-approved for financing. The pre-qualified or pre-approved financing meets and PHA established requirements for financing the purchase of a home. The pre-qualified or pre-approved financing amount is sufficient to purchase the housing that meets HQS in the PHA jurisdiction. Minimum employment requirements. One or more adult members of the family who will own the home must be currently employed on a full-time basis, meaning not less than the average of 30 hours per week, and has been continuously employed during the year before commencement of homeownership assistance. The family that has the right to occupy the land for at least 40 years are eligible for the purchase under the Home Choice Voucher Homeownership Program. Units purchased under a lease purchase agreement may be eligible for rental assistance prior to the actual sale and the homeownership assistance after the unit has been sold to the family, provided the family meets the homeownership eligibility requirements was selected by the PHA and has completed the pre-assistance homeownership counseling program at the time the family will assume homeownership of the unit. Families may enter into contract of sale for units not yet under construction. However, homeownership assistance cannot begin for that until the unit environmental review requirements have been satisfied. Homeownership assistance may not be used to purchase a property that includes other residential or commercial space that will be leased by the homeowner. The housing search and purchase time limits. A PHA may establish time limit for the families that have been approved for homeownership voucher assistance to find a home, and also to complete the purchase of the property. These time limits may differ in the length from the time limits provided to the family to search under the rental program. If PHA is allowing the participant to use the voucher for homeownership, families who are already participating in the Housing Choice Voucher Program may continue to receive rental assistance while they search for the unit until they purchase. If the PHA is allowing the applicant to use a voucher for homeownership at the conclusion of the PHA established search period or the period allowed for the completion of the purchase, families admitted from the waiting have not found or purchased a unit may, at the PHA's discretion, may be given the option to receive rental voucher or to be returned to the waiting list. Physical conditions of unit assisted under the homeownership voucher program must meet the HUD housing quality standards before the homeownership voucher assistance may commence. In fact, 2 inspections are required for a unit to be approved for assistance. An HQS inspection performed by the PHA inspector and a professional inspection conducted by a qualified independent home inspector that is hired by and paid by the family. Each participant family must submit a copy of the contract of sale to the PHA. The agreement must include the price and under the terms of the price and the terms of purchase, provisions for pre-purchase inspection by an independent home inspection chosen by the purchaser. Provisions that the purchaser is not obligated to purchase a unit unless the inspection is satisfactory to the purchaser. Provisions that the purchaser is not obligated to pay for any necessary repairs, and seller certification that the seller has not been disbarred, suspended, or subject. PHA have found helpful to develop their own addendum to the contract of the sale to be used by the family to negotiate the necessary HUD requirements into the sale agreement. These requirements are not generally covered by the standard contract of sale. In addition, some PHA include additional language such as provisions that explicitly allow the PHA to inspect the unit, allow the family to terminate the agreement without penalty if the PHA disapproves the unit, and require that any repairs that the homeowner agrees to bring the unit into compliance with the HQS will be completed prior to settlement. The potential drawback of such approach is that the seller may back out agreeing to the terms and conditions above beyond that is required in the standard contract sale.
All right, thank you for that. A lot of information there. Do we have any questions from the audience at this time about that? Yes.
Yes.
Information available on the website.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, very good. Thank you so much. We're now going to turn our attention back to the rental market.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Do the required 30 hours full time, can that be made up of 2 jobs, or does it have to be from 1 job?
They want it for it to be current. So most of it should be one employment.
You can't work 2 part-time jobs that way?
No.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Excellent.
I actually have a question for
Yes.
Reinaldo. So, anecdotally, what do you see with these voucher holders when they start successfully renting with you? Is it, they come in, they rent, and they say, I am aware of the path to home ownership. I have my eye on that target. I'm going to work from day one to achieve that goal. I'm familiar with what's available at Rhode Island Housing. And I understand the guidance that you can provide as a housing authority, and that is my goal, period. Is it common? Is it not common? Is it the dream with this community who is renting?
Well, a lot of the challenges we've been getting is credit. The credit, it's not there, so they would need to. We need to work with them to repair their credit, to get the credit where it should be, and to see where their income is, to see if they are able to afford, a unit.
Great. Good. That's helpful. Thank you.
Reinaldo, could you speak to I'm a loan officer, so I
Mhm.
understand this from a different point of view as realtors, but do they still, is it the path to home ownership, do they have to participate in is it the self-sufficiency
FSS.
program?
Yeah.
They don't have to. It's their choice.
Can you explain to everyone what that program is?
We actually are going to be covering that in just a little bit.
Good
Thank you,
question,
Sandra.
Sarah.
It's a great question.
FSS, I believe. Is that the acronym, Mike?
Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
family insufficiency.
All right. We're going to turn back to Michael for a moment. As an expert in leased housing and rental services, we invite you to dive into the Section 8 approval process for rental units, including crucial topics of inspection requirements, Please share your insights on how landlords can navigate this process and ensure compliance with the Section 8 guidelines.
Sure. So like I mentioned earlier, once somebody has a voucher, they go, they find an apartment, that landlord would send us this called an RFTA, request for tenant approval. We would look at it, do our rent analysis. If everything checks out, we'd send an inspector. We have someone full-time in-house that all he does is inspections. We also have a contract with a third-party vendor. So we usually get the inspection done within 2 weeks. And it's, as Ronaldo mentioned earlier, we follow the HUD's housing quality standards right now. As of October 1st, that's changing. There's a new inspection protocol that HUD is rolling out. It's called NSPIRE. I mean, an inspection is an inspection. What they're doing, it's really how they're grading the inspection. Right now, HQS is pass or fail. Under Inspire, it's 0 to 100 point system, and the inspection has to be above 60 to pass. And the focus is kind of more on resident living spaces than it is exteriors and systems. Those items still count, but it's really, there's more points, there's kind of more focus on the resident's actual living space, making sure there's, no holes in the walls and smoke detectors are working, things like that. The things that we look for when we go out to the inspection, it's basic. You wouldn't put your mother in a unit that you wouldn't want to put one of the voucher holders in, right? So think about that if you're owning a property. If your family member could live there, a voucher holder could live there. We're not looking at anything extravagant. Obviously, no holes in the walls, intact flooring. One of the things that occasionally becomes a problem are screens, window screens. If they're there, they have to be in good shape. If they're there, they have to be in good shape. I'll say it again, if they're there. So if they're not there when we go to the inspection, we're not inspecting them, so it's not an issue. So we know that those screens get damaged very easily. My recommendation is put new screens in or remove the screens.
Just a quick question. Do you inspect for lead as well?
We don't inspect for lead. We do require that the property has a lead certificate. Yeah. We don't do the inspection ourselves.
Can I have one
Yeah.
real quick? When he talks about the housing quality standards, it's also not the minimum housing code. They're two completely separate inspections, two completely separate requirements, standards that need to be met. And I think that's something that needs to be clear for many of the landlords, because they believe they're hand in hand and they're really not. And I think that's important to understand.
So on the physical side, it's really, again, it's just getting us out there to do the inspection. Again, we have to go back every 2 years, make sure the property is in good shape. I don't know if you want to dig into FSS now, or should we wait until?
We're going to give 1 second between that and FS. But I would like what is the process outside of the inspection for the landlord? What types of documents would they need to be providing, or paperwork would need to be filled out?
So it's that RFTA initially. We approve the unit, we approve the rent, and then the landlord enters into a lease with the resident, and there's a contract between the housing authority and the landlord, telling, it's a contract saying we will pay X amount of dollars based on the individual's income. So that could change. There's an annual recertification that the tenant goes through. So if their rent is their contribution is $200 now, the rent's $1,000, we would pay for that first 12 months, $800. When they do a recertification, if their income has increased, obviously their contribution goes up, our contribution goes down. So there's a contract between the housing authority and the landlord, and a lease between the landlord and the resident.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. With the Section 8 subsidies that are offered, I would like to invite Michael Crane to provide us with guidance on the relatively new legislation that makes source of income a protected class here in Rhode Island. Michael, can you please enlighten us on the implications and requirements of this legislation for real estate professionals as well as landlords?
Great, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Michael Crane. So I advise many landlords, especially on discrimination. And we have our newest protected class, which is the source of income, which is relatively undefined here in Rhode Island, which is, of course, unfortunate, but it is a newer law. It is a newer protected class, and I think it's a really important protected class. So the boring part always that I discuss is the Fair Housing Act, which is the Federal Fair Housing Act, which has its specific set of protected classes, which is gender, country of origin, race, family, all the ones that we've all pretty much come to know. Rhode Island and all states can add to that. They can always raise the floor is what we say and how we say it. And Rhode Island has done just that. Veterans were mentioned earlier, victims of domestic violence, which were mentioned earlier, and now source of income, which is basically any lawful source of income is how it's defined. So what's a lawful source of income? I'm sure we can all guess and giggle at what's an unlawful source of income, but the lawful source of income, which is basically most forms of income that come in. Just, little side humor. I do have a client that asked me to approve a lease once where they wanted to bar any attorney or anyone who received legal income from residing at their premises. But unfortunately, most of us receive a lawful source of income. But so when someone receives a lawful source of income, what do you do? So the biggest thing we see with realtors and the biggest complaint that my office gets from landlords or from housing providers, from realtors, and I'm going to jump right into this because I hear it probably 3 or 4 times a year, is a realtor went to rent my property. Someone called and said I had a Section 8 voucher, and the realtor immediately said, no, we don't accept Section 8. And that's a huge one that we hear a lot. And Section 8 is obviously a lawful source of income, or else we wouldn't be here today. But it is said enough where I think it's something that needs to be addressed. Because one, not only have you committed discrimination on its face, they could run down to the Human Rights Commission or run down to Superior Court, file an action, and you're going to be out $2,000 or $3,000, and you're going to have to admit that you discriminated against somebody. But you've also now made the owner of the property liable for your discrimination because you're their agent under the law. You're not just a real estate agent, you're their agent under the law. So I think that's something really important to understand when understanding the laws. So lawful source. So while it's not specifically defined, it is lawful source of income, which is going to envelop, most incomes that individuals receive. So be very careful. And the other thing is that question that we get a lot is, well, and Mike touched on this, and I think more than touched on this, is, well, what if the Section 8 voucher or whatever the subsidy is doesn't cover the rent? Well, you can't just outright say no, because you can actually petition or request that of Rhode Island Housing, of Providence Housing. Hey, listen, the rent for this unit is $1,800. The standard's only $1,695. Can you go up $100? Or what can we do? Where can we work? And those are questions that all need to be asked before you outright say no. You need to make some sort of accommodation, some sort of request to ensure that, hey, listen, you can actually outright deny this applicant. So that's a big question we get. The other question we get is, well, what if they don't meet my income standards? My income standards for this place is, it's, $2,000 a month. They've got to make at least $6,000 a month. Well, there are some states, because about half the states have adopted the source of income. It's probably a little bit more than half the states now. There are some states that define what the income should be at 3 times as what's the voucher holder paying. So if they're paying $200 a month, well, and that's 30% of their income, well, 30 times 3 is only 90%, so they got a 10% window there, right? So they do receive 3 times their income to qualify for your place. You can't just do a blanket, if they have to make $6,000 a month, 6,000 times 12 is $72,000 a year. They have to make $72,000 a year, and that's going to go on the application. That's actually source of income discrimination in many states. So you have to be very careful how you approach it, and you want to approach it with what I say, with some caring, kind, and compassion and understanding of what's going on. And not only that, you're getting the voucher subsidy. So that's a benefit as well. So, to ensure that income's coming in, so long as you're meeting the HQS standards and all of those, that money's coming in. So that's really important to understand. So I can take some questions on this if you'd like. But being that the law is new, there aren't specific definitions in Rhode Island, but the outright no is what's going to get you in more trouble than anything.
I can just add too to what Michael said. The fact that the vouchers going to the landlord during COVID, as an example, a lot of folks weren't working and lost their jobs, hours got cut. If they didn't have a voucher, they would not be able to pay a market rate rent. Their income went down, they would come to the housing authority, we would do an interim certification to say, oh, your income went down, you're paying less now, and we would increase our subsidies. So those landlords during COVID had no loss of rent at all, for the most part.
And that's an excellent point as well. Rhode Island Housing and other housing authorities in the federal government I think, based on what we saw, the rents were jacked up during the pandemic. Everybody went up $500, $600, $800 a month real quick. But I think those entities were very quick to react to say, hey, listen, we understand that the standards increased for what the monthly rent was, and we're going to react appropriately to ensure that the voucher holders can still afford these units and still be able to reside in these units. So I think that's important to understand as well.
Are there any questions on that from the audience at this time? Okay, excellent. Thank you. So we've talked a bit about the Section 8 rental process, and obviously Reinaldo has shared with us how you can use your voucher towards the goal of potentially home ownership. Reinaldo, I was hoping you could perhaps speak to what the customer experience is going through that process with you in an anecdotal sort of way. So you've given us the guidelines, but if you could tell us a little bit about what a typical process in counseling someone through this process would look like.
When they come to us, we pull their credit report, we check their financial documents. We check the credit report to see if there's any discrepancies or any negative items that are on the credit report that need to be addressed before they can go out and speak with a lender. Because what the lender is going to do, they're going to pull their credit report. Another thing we do, we look at their financial documents. We'll look at their income tax returns, 2 years. We go back 2 years. We use their pay stubs to determine their affordability, to see if they can, if they're ready to make a purchase, if they have enough income that can pay their part of their mortgage payment. After that, we send them to the lender. The lender gets them pre-approved. We keep in constant communication with the lender and with the real estate agent, so that way we can better service the client. Once that's done, they work with their agent. We have constant communication with the agent. The agent lets us know, as well as the client, the participant, that they already submitted an offer. They send us the purchase and sales agreement. We review it. If it's okay, it gets our approval. The lender will also approve it as well. It goes into underwriting. Once that process is done, we'll continue. Within the process, we start doing the home inspection. Once the home inspection is done, and if there's any problems, if there are any issues in the home inspection, they need to be done. They need to be fixed before the PHA's before the PHA's inspector goes out to have the final approval. It's nerve-wracking for the client. They don't know, what's going to happen. If it's somewhere underwriting, something's going to show up. They don't know if something's going to show up in the inspection report that the seller doesn't want to fix. So it tends to be, a little bit nerve-wracking. That's where we come in and we try to reassure them. Say, these are things that need to be done because this is a big purchase that you are going to be doing within, not only for yourself, but also for your family. Yeah. So you have to take those things into consideration. Other than that, once they get to closing, they receive their keys. The best feeling in the world is when they come and say, you know what, I didn't know I could have become a homeowner. Not only being low income, but also receiving Section 8.
Mm-hmm. So what advice can you give to our realtor friends working with these clients, and what would best serve them and your organization?
Have patience. Have patience. All they want is for somebody to, have their back, not look at them as, okay, and I'm not being, mean, not just a commission, because that's what they usually tell me. Have patience with them. And keep them informed, educate them. Me as a counselor, I will do that ahead of time before they meet with either the lender or with the realtor. So that way, it doesn't fall on the realtor. That way they know they have a friend or they have a partner that's partnering up with them to help them in their home buying journey.
That's great. Thank you. Yes.
I have a question about that inspection. So we do have a regular house inspection that they can choose to do or not do. I'm assuming for you, maybe it's mandatory because buyers they have the 10 days to do whatever they want, but they can waive it. Now, would that be mandatory with you? And then there's another one that comes out, and then what happens if the seller says, I'm not changing or fixing or repairing whatever may come out of your inspection? How does that address them?
Well, that's where the client has to make a decision
I
whether,
didn't know if it was gonna be a mandatory thing after your inspection, because with the regular inspection, the seller is not obligated to do any of that stuff if she doesn't want to.
through the voucher, it has to be done.
So
Because
the
the-
seller has no option to say no, or he can back away and say, then I'm not selling.
To be
it."
honest, I haven't received that issue.
Okay.
So it'll be hard for me to say, oh,
Okay, I just didn't know if it was.
but I can find out for you.
No, I'm just saying because you said, if it needs to be done before.
Yes,
it's finally
well,
approved,
the
then
inspection,
it's the-
well, the way we had it with our clients is that they're able to have their home inspection done. They pay for it.
Okay.
Once their inspection gets back, they have to bring it to the PHA. And then the PHA inspector will go through the list to see what needs to be fixed.
Oh, so it's your department or your office who actually determines what the buyer is gonna request as repairs?
Not necessarily, yeah.
Would you-
Because one of the concerns we have would be any electrical issues, smoke detectors, like Michael just said, smoke detector, structural foundation.
Okay.
We just want to, the purpose of the inspections is we want to make sure that the client is not going to have any issues once they receive the keys. Because we already know they're probably a low income family. So we don't,
Afford the repairs.
and they probably, as you know, probably within the first 2 years, if anything happens at that point, if they don't have a cushion, they're gonna have trouble making certain type of house payments.
Great question.
So it's not an additional inspection? Because I know before it was an additional inspection?
I think it still is, but once again, I'll get back to you on that one. Because I don't want to say yes or no, and then I don't want to be giving out any type of false information. Yes.
I have a quick question. Do they continue receiving the same help that they used to before they bought the house? The voucher that they had?
If they continue to receive the housing
The
assisting,
Assistant.
the housing, they keep on as the way it works in income. So if their income goes up, you already know that they're gonna have the housing choice voucher is gonna go, homeownership voucher will go down.
Exactly, but let's assume that they had the same job, the same income. The voucher is still the same.
Yes,
Okay, the second question, can they have a cosigner to purchase the house?
to be honest with you, we never had that problem. So I wouldn't be able to answer that question if they need a cosigner. Because it would depend on the lender that they use. The lender will most likely if they need a cosigner at the time, but I haven't had that issue yet.
Okay, because sometimes they are low income, they don't make enough money to purchase a property that they want. So if they need a cosigner, they probably will use it.
That's a good question.
Yes.
Reinaldo, you said earlier that one of the biggest issues that you have is credit worthiness,
Mhm.
and that you help them in that process. Can you touch on that? How do you help them? Are there credit building programs, credit counseling programs, or is it just, hey, this is what's on your credit report, and these are the things you have to address?
Yes. We look at the credit report and we'll address if there's any errors or discrepancies in the credit report, collections, information that doesn't belong in the credit report. We try to see if what's in the credit report is actually, it's theirs, an account that they defaulted on maybe a year ago, 2 years ago. If there's any fraud that they might not know that somebody probably stole their identity. We address those issues.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, if I can, just to
Yes,
talk
please.
about one of the vehicles to get from being a voucher holder to a homeowner is that FSS program that we talked about, Family Self-Sufficiency. It's probably the greatest HUD program there is out there that nobody knows about. And it's, I don't think anybody wants, we want to provide assistance to folks that need the assistance, but I think everybody wants to see people succeed, right? And we want to see people move out of the voucher assistance program and move into homeownership. That's the goal of everybody. So under FSS, a resident signs up for the program. It's a 5-year commitment, and they're committing to engaging in financial literacy classes, job training. We have counselors that work with them throughout the 5-year period. And it's very unique. So they start off entering the program, and their portion of the rent that they pay, let's use round numbers, say is $200. As they go through this program, as they improve their situation, as they get new employment, better employment, their income goes up. Obviously, their rent goes up too. So now they're paying $500 a month, and then $800 and $1,000. So every time they increase their rental payment, HUD matches that and creates an escrow for them. So if they go from $200 to $500 every month, HUD's putting in $300 into an escrow account. When they graduate the program, they take that escrow and they can do what they want with it. We've had several success stories, people leaving with $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 and putting it down on a new home. So our counselors are providing them that training to become a homeowner. They don't all use it for homeownership, but it's a great opportunity. It's an opportunity to see people, go from here to here and improve their situation, whether they remain a renter or go to homeownership. They've gotten training. They've kind of learned how to save, right? It kind of teaches them what a savings account can do for them too. So it's very successful. It's labor intensive. We are only allowed to help, I think it's 125 people right now in the program, and it's full. So at Rhode Island Housing, we've got 125 folks in the program right now, and every month we have graduates. And again, some of them graduate with $50,000, $40,000. Some graduate with $1,000, which is fine. It doesn't matter. They can pull that money out in case of emergency throughout the 5-year period. If they have an issue or they're relocating to another property, they can use that money for relocation costs. So it's a very, very successful program. And at Rhode Island Housing, we're looking at ways to expand it beyond the Section 8 voucher program. So we'd like to see other renters in other programs or the regular tax credit unit be able to find funding to be able to do the same thing for them too, to help people move to homeownership out of the rental portfolio.
Thank you for touching upon that. Does anybody have any questions about the self-sufficiency, the family self-sufficiency program?
I would like to know about it.
No, go ahead.
No. I was just saying that I would like to know about it.
Oh,
About it.
I just wanted to know, like, when a person applies for this program, like, a normal closing is like 45 days. What's the time frame? Is it the same or is it a lot longer?
Oh, well, it's a 5-year commitment, up to 5 years for them to go through the program. But to apply for it, they would be a voucher holder. Once they get their voucher, we provide them information on this program and ask if they're interested in it. It's completely voluntary.
Yeah,
And
so
this-
so just say that they want to purchase a house, right? And they put an offer in, like, what is the timeline as far as, like, the offer gets accepted and then you guys get involved and then
So once they graduate this program, that money's theirs. They can take it and use it. Then it would go through homeownership, right? It would be a regular.
I would say at that point, once a clean transition occurs, then it's traditional mortgage underwriting processing time, which gets to your indication earlier, 45 days, for example. Yeah.
Great. Any other questions about? Yes.
Yeah, I think the reason why she mentioned that question because in the past there's been delays when it came to closing a loan with Rhode Island Housing. So has the process been more streamlined so it could get done on time?
Are you referring to transactions where the applicant was a Section 8 voucher holder or in general?
In general.
Good point. Good question. So I will say, Peter Pagonis, by the way, my first time speaking. Great to be here. Thank you for the board for organizing this event. It's great to be here and share opinions and thoughts. I will say longer closing times were more prevalent prior to 2017 or so, when Rhode Island Housing made a major investment in information technology and streamlined its technology process to basically go from a paper-intensive process whereby the applicant would submit their supporting documentation by paper, and it would either go directly to Rhode Island Housing or via a lender. And anytime something's paper, it inherently takes more time to process, to examine, to read, to look at, to file, versus something on a screen. So since then, I'm quite proud of the team for the speed in which they turn around files. I think we've been on a 1 to 2 turnaround for about 3 years now, turn time. Obviously, there are certain things that no lender, no matter how good they are, can control that happen in the process. A borrower will switch jobs in the middle. That's problematic. A borrower will open a big credit line in the middle of the process. That's problematic. So surely it behooves all of us as lenders to stress to the applicant that they have everything organized and they're ready to go. And when your loan officer calls you or emails you and says, we need something, that you pay attention and work quickly to get them those documents. But to answer your question, I think a lot of that is history. Those long times, I think a lot of it is innuendo, hearsay, and no longer the case.
That was actually a great transition because I was going to be speaking with you next, Peter. I would love for you to share the requirements for clients to receive first-time buyer assistance. So any insights you can share about the specific requirements that clients must meet to be eligible for first-time assistance, what programs or resources are available to assist them in the achievement of homeownership as a goal. Anything you can share about that
Great.
for us?
So I think right now is a great time for a first-time home buyer to be looking for a house. And I know that goes against conventional wisdom with inventory levels really low, interest rates on a 30-year fix around the 7% market, 7% rate, some uncertainty in the banking sector. 3 of the 4 largest banking failures have occurred in the last 2 months, believe it or not, in the United States. We have some uncertainty regarding the debt ceiling, which I'll talk about later, although that seems to be coming together nicely. So why do I say it's a good time for a first-time home buyer to buy a house, or perhaps any home buyer to purchase? Well, let's talk about the first-time home buyer and the programs available to help that home buyer with closing costs and down payment. So Rhode Island Housing, and that's where I work, so I can speak to Rhode Island Housing's offerings, certainly. And I would say consumers should look at other opportunities for help and assistance other than Rhode Island Housing. But we offer right now 3 products that I think play a role in the current market. So a lot of you may have heard in the media and through friends and family, through realtor partners, through your mortgage relationships, mortgage lender relationships, mortgage loan officer relationships, that there is a $17,500 grant that hit the market the end of January. That is a new product for Rhode Island Housing. I should say it came from ARPA funds and state and local fiscal recovery funds, SLFRF, it's a tongue twister. Those funds offer $17,500, as I mentioned, to first-time home buyers who are buying their primary residence in Rhode Island, have a minimum credit score of 660, meet certain income qualifications, and agree to not only buy the property as their primary residence, but to stay there and maintain it as their primary residence. This is extremely powerful. Why? Because as opposed to other programs that we offer and other lenders or banks may offer, it's immediately forgivable. So the applicant, borrower / homeowner goes to the closing table and signs the grant agreement, signs the first mortgage, signs the note, the security instrument, and so forth, and instantly has $17,500 worth of equity in the property. So, if you take a look at, let's just say, a $400,000 sales price, and let's say the borrower puts in 3%, they go with a conventional mortgage, a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac mortgage, they put 3% of their own money into the transaction, so that'd be $12,000. They receive the grant, the statewide DPA grant for $17,500. Right there, the borrower is on day one enjoying an equity position of about 30%. I'm sorry, $30,000, which is not far from 10% of the sales price of $400,000. So, the borrower pays down some principal. We all understand and know that little principal is paid in the early months, but the borrower does pay some principal in the early months, and they're at 10% equity within a year. Very powerful, puts them in a great position to pay down their mortgage and really enjoy a good amount of equity and use that equity in later years, perhaps to buy another property or move up, I should say, into a bigger property, perhaps as their family grows. So great time to take advantage of that product. Funds are limited. We were awarded $30 million. Small percentage of that is devoted to our expenses, our admin costs, and the rest is dedicated to Rhode Island homebuyers. There are also some other programs. They're less popular given the introduction of the grant to the market, but we have a plain vanilla 15-year fixed second mortgage whereby the borrower pays it down every month, and after 15 years, if they hold it for 15 years, it's paid off, and that's the end of that. That's good product. If the borrower does not have a 660 credit score, you could have a 620 credit score and qualify for that second mortgage. And it works just like a first mortgage, but it's in a second lien position, 15-year term. And then we have another product called the 10K DPAs, the $10,000 loan, 0% interest. It is a lien on the property, and it is only due upon resale, transfer, refinance, and essentially the borrower uses those funds to purchase, and it is due upon sale, transfer, refinance. So 0%, which is great. It's interesting that $10,000 went a lot further a few years ago when we introduced the product than it does now. Rhode Island Housing's average loan amount is around $325,000, which is a lot of money for the market that we serve, for low to moderate income buyer or first time home buyer. So there's certainly been some pressure on the consumer to keep pace with the escalating sales price and appreciation in the market. Getting back to the rent versus buy debate, if you will, and we could spend probably a few days here talking about the benefits of both. First, I'd like to say, while I'm in the business of home ownership and we have to make loans to survive and to keep my staff employed and so forth, I do think home ownership is not for everyone. I have a few friends who are quite successful in life. Financially, they have beautiful families, and they are adamantly opposed to owning. One of them is afraid of a crisis, a financial crisis, perhaps similar to what we saw in 2008. The others don't want a commitment. They want to be able to leave for a job offer in Austin, Texas, or Los Angeles, or Seattle, and don't want to really establish roots, and that's fine. Obviously, I'm a big proponent of owning a home. I think it can change your life. I think it's a wealth builder. I think you can transfer, and I shouldn't say I think, one can transfer it to their kids, and it can be a generational source of wealth. But many seem to forget that not only does the home provide a return on your down payment, on your investment, but let's not forget, it's also doing something very important. It's putting a roof over your head. It's giving you shelter. It's giving you a safe place to raise a family, create memories. It gives you access to a school, a library, a police station, a fire station. It gives you access to a community. So we often talk about home ownership as an investment, as if it's a stock that I buy that I can just look at on my screen and say, oh, it's up 3%, great, 5%, great, 10%. It does a lot more. So I think, especially on a primary residence where you're going to live there either alone or with your family, let's not forget about that important role. I think also we tend to forget about, and I know renters often are not taught this, but let's not forget the fact that when a homeowner or a debt holder, mortgage holder makes a payment, principal and interest payment, let's break that down. What the components of that mortgage payment? So principal and interest, as we all know, right? Let's forget about interest-only payments. Those are in the rearview mirror. A lot of those are gone. But traditional 30-year fixed principal and interest, we all know in the early years, in the early months, very little, small percentage of your mortgage payment goes towards paying down principal. Most of it goes towards interest, and the bank collects the interest, and they're happy to take that money, and that's how they survive, and that's fine. But the principal, so let's take an example. Let's talk about the principal and take an example. So let's say you have a $2,000 mortgage payment, and in the early months, month one, the interest portion is $1,850 and the principal is $150. Let's not forget that that $150 is your money and continues to be your money. Yes, you have to come out of pocket and write a check or make a transfer or send a bill pay for $2,000 to the bank XYZ. But that $150, yes, you have to come up with it. It comes out. It's a cash flow issue. It goes into a separate account called equity in your house. And let's not forget that. Everyone feels like $2,000 out the door, I'm never going to see that money again. Now, granted, you may not tap that equity, or you may not realize that equity. You may not tap that equity with an equity line, or you may not tap that equity with a sale, but it's still your money. It's being rearranged and moved on your personal balance sheet, on your assets, your liability, and your equity. So I think it's very important, and especially for occasions where one looks at the rent versus buy analysis. Oh, it's pretty close. I could rent for $200 cheaper. Well, let's not forget about the fact that that money, the principal portions of your payment are staying within your personal financial house, if you will. In terms of just a couple thoughts I hear about, whether we're headed for a recession, whether we're headed for a crash with depreciation levels and what we see in very high appreciation levels. Couple things why I think we're going to be in pretty good shape. Many economists look at birth rates. So the average age of a homeowner generally is 33 years old. So 33 years ago today, 1990, I believe it would be, you would look at how many people were being born in 1990. You'd look at the next couple of years. So those birth rates are good. People every year are going to be, a whole cohort of 33-year-olds are going to be coming online and say, okay, we're here, we're ready to buy. So demand will be good. Supply, we know, is tight. Inventory is tight. Supply and demand, economics 101. Hard to see a crash happening with that example. Also, we know that as a result of the mortgage crisis, the credit crisis, and the Great Recession that followed, lenders and banks and CFPB has played a big role in regulating, and FHFA has played a big role in tightening up standards and requirements. Loan officers have to be licensed. A lot of those toxic, quote-unquote, loans that existed in the past no longer exist. So sound underwriting, you have to qualify. And while, of course, there will always be defaults, underwriting is much tougher, and I don't see that getting anywhere near where it was about 15 years ago or so. I also applaud loan officers and realtors who want to help first-time home buyers. I think it's great. I think you really add value. I think it probably warms your heart when you take them to the finish line and work with them, and they really evaluate your advice. It's the first time through the process with them. By far, it'll be the biggest asset of their lifetime. But it's also good business. Let's be frank. 28% in this country, 28% of all transactions include a first-time home buyer. 39% of all transactions where there is a mortgage includes a first-time home buyer. So the numbers are pretty good to certainly involve first-time home buyers as part of your business plan. I think if you ignore them at your peril. Another point I'd like to talk about, where perhaps we can talk with the voucher holders about, is that home ownership and buying a house is probably one of the only investments where you can put down a small chunk of money, or maybe zero, and participate 100% in the appreciation. So your house that you buy for $400,000 doesn't know whether you put down 20%, 80,000, 0, or 3%, 12,000. It's still going to appreciate at the same clip, and you're going to participate in 100% of that upside. So what that is leverage, right? You're borrowing money at a high percentage of the asset, and your return is exponential. You can't even calculate the return, what your return is when you put zero down. You get an error message on your Excel sheet or your calculator. So the power of leverage, I think leverage is great, assuming you can afford the monthly payment, of course, right? With rates still low, I know we were spoiled with 3%, 4%, we're around 7% now. Why not borrow and use those dollars for other things? Use them for your emergency fund, 6 months or 3 months, as Dave Ramsey would say. Why not use those dollars for college education or other investments that could yield a higher return than the return that you would get by paying down your mortgage? So great opportunity for first-time home buyers, renters, and it's an asset that does extremely, extremely well. Out of the last 81 years, 73 out of 81 years have returned positive appreciation rates to the market. So I invite you to tell me another asset class, Bitcoin, bonds, stocks, gold, that perform better. And by the way, it's putting a roof over your head.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Peter. You spoke about 3 programs
Yep.
that you have.
Yep.
Can any of those programs be used in conjunction with another?
Good question. They cannot. It's one or the other. So right now, as I mentioned, the grant is very attractive. Pure dollar amount, $17,500. The $10,000 product pales in comparison to the $17,500, and the extra assistance product, which we offer, which is the plain vanilla second mortgage, 15-year fixed amortizing, that's also less than $17,500.
And this is just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
The 17.5 program, I know you had a budget of $30 million.
Yeah.
Do you know roughly kind of how much of that has been?
Absolutely. So there's 2 numbers to look at. There's reservations and closings. Reservations have done very well. There's a lot of popularity in closings. So as of May 31st, we have funded about 26% of those dollars. And we do think, if I may, that clip will pick up a little more as we get deeper into the summer, traditional home buying, spring applications, so forth. We launched this on a very cold day in late January with freezing rain,
Yeah.
and we still saw a few registrations those first few days. And as I think sentiment improves a bit about the overall home buying landscape, more will look at this program.
So do you think, is outside of operating expenses for the staff, roughly 70% left over that haven't been executed? Is there a projection in mind, like, hey, this will carry us, potentially to the following year, maybe 2 years worth?
Yeah, so I will say that it is going much faster than we anticipated. It's proving a lot of our spreadsheets wrong. So that's a positive point. I think it's certainly stimulated the local real estate business. But if a consumer is talking with you about buying a home and they are ready, I would not wait for interest rates to fall. That's another argument. Well, what happens when interest rates fall? The line outside at the open house is going to be 5 times as long. So there's a saying that I'm sure we've all heard, rent the interest rate, marry the home. So, we'll still see some appreciation. Your equity will improve. You're in the house. Not the end of the world if you have to pay 7%, 7.25% for 6 months, 9 months, and then refinance with Sandra and be happy. Yeah.
Awesome. I believe you had a question.
I have a question. I've had a few closings where people have been, they've received the grant, which is great. But then the first time I had the closing, a recapture document came right through. And I stopped the attorney and I said, wait a second, what is that? Nobody mentioned that. And then my buyers were like, what is that?
Yeah.
And like a couple of attorneys have had an issue, like being able to explain that in layman's terms to somebody that has never owned a property. So I saw a flyer or something that came through, a lender kind of sent it to me. It was like 3 weeks ago on what it was. And I'm like, this still is crazy. Like, I don't understand it. So, I mean, I know you say it's immediately forgivable, but then what is that recapture
Absolutely.
for like a kindergarten?
Yes.
Tell me what it means so
happy-
I can tell.
Great
that's
question.
fine.
So happy to explain that. So the recapture has nothing to do with the grant.
Okay.
The grant is 100% forgivable as soon as the ink dries on the document. The recapture is associated with the first mortgage. So I won't get too much in the weeds and answer the question in sort of general or basic terms. But basically, the recapture is an IRS requirement whereby if the homeowner who uses tax-exempt mortgage revenue bond financing,
The grant.
no, not the grant, the first mortgage, goes that route and within 9 years sells the home, and their income and the value of the home both rise at a very steep clip, which is actually very good news for that person, right? You're jumping the corporate ladder, your house is appreciating, then they could pay a certain penalty to the IRS, a percentage of the original principal balance, not to exceed 8.25%, I believe. I can get that exact number, but now, this is all a moot conversation. Why? Because Rhode Island Housing will reimburse the borrower if they provide us the documentation that shows, in fact, they were subject to that recapture tax. We'll reimburse them, and we have the documents ready to go if indeed that does happen. So no risk for the consumer, number one. Number two, I have not seen one of these cases since I started in 2013. And we think, and this is lore and storytelling, and no one's sure, but we think maybe there's been 1 or 2 in the history of the corporation since 1973. So very unlikely that the house and the income would appreciate at levels that would trigger this tax. So nothing to do with the grant, all about the first mortgage and the source of funds, mortgage revenue bond funds.
But is that something that just started coming up after this grant?
Nope.
Because it was, I've never seen that before. I don't
It's
remember.
so
it
it's
being-
possible more people are talking about it because of the increasing appreciation that we're seeing in the marketplace. I think, right? That's 50% of the trigger is the home valuation and appreciation, perhaps. But this has been around ever since we used mortgage revenue bonds to fund our first mortgages. No problem.
Great question. Are there any other questions about first-time homebuyer assistance at this time?
Just one question.
Yeah.
Peter, are there still PMI requirements with your programs?
Absolutely. So on the conventional side, plain vanilla, if your LTV, loan to value, is greater than 80%, you require mortgage insurance, PMI. I will say, as a housing finance agency, an HFA, if you will, we do have access to a suite of products from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, whereby the PMI for borrowers who make less than 80% AMI is cheaper for them than if they make greater than 80% AMI. So they have that advantage there to pay less. And that's something that's available with, whether it's Rhode Island Housing or Mass Housing, for example. There is mortgage insurance, not known as PMI, on the FHA side, different percentages and different animal there.
Thank you. So Peter, you were mentioning a bit about, the economy and our government in the past.
Yeah.
I know that there are certainly some timely concerns and conversations happening right now revolving around, you mentioned the debt ceiling and hopefully having that wrapped up sooner rather than later. There's also been talk about rules penalizing buyers with a credit score of 740 who are taking out loans more than 500,000. Would you mind enlightening us on these sort of topics and your take on that?
No problem. So let's talk about the debt ceiling. So the good news is it looks like we're coming to an agreement as a country. Our Congress is going to come to agreement. So first pass the House, then pass the Senate, and it's going to go to President Biden's desk, and he said that he will sign. So that gives us the ability for the next couple of years to basically fund the operations of the government. As we know, we're in a global economy. Mortgages are part of that global economy. Someone in China, someone in India, someone in Japan can be buying mortgage-backed securities, selling mortgage-backed securities, and we all know the underlying asset is the mortgage that you and I have. So the good news is, we would, if for some reason there wasn't an agreement and there wasn't some sort of coming together and in a bipartisan way on this topic, many institutions that deal with mortgages could be affected, and thereby at a minimum affect service levels to the consumer and to the lender, and at a maximum perhaps stop funding of certain programs. Let's think about how the government is involved in the mortgage business. Well, there's FHA, of course. There's HUD, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. While they are not 100% part of the government, they are government-sponsored enterprise and work closely with the government. So I think we're in a good place. An example of how we need to work with the government is IRS transcripts, right? Lenders need to request transcripts to verify that the consumer has filed tax returns, or that the income that the consumer represents is accurate, and so forth. So that would be an example of a department that perhaps certain divisions within the IRS that would be put on furlough or closed temporarily. So the good news is we look to be past that issue. One thing that we should probably have our eyes on a bit is the whole student loan forgiveness issue. And I know this is not part of the agenda, but there was some language in the bill, and I don't know if it's still there, that talked about the Department of Education's will no longer have the ability or the power to pause student loan payments, right? So let's look at two potential scenarios. And this is with the Supreme Court, and all indications suggest that we will receive word from the Supreme Court in the next few weeks, several weeks, on this matter. If for some reason student forgiveness does become reality and it's codified, we will have a good number of consumers in the market that will all of a sudden maybe be ready for home ownership, because you think about the student debt obligation that they currently have and what that would free up for them. So something to keep your eye on, especially in a higher interest rate environment. So I just wanted to mention that. We should be getting news on that. And the other item, John, that you talked about were the pricing adjustments associated with mortgages. And the person that wrote in the question referenced a 740 credit score and something about $500,000. I'm not sure where the $500,000 number came from, but starting May 1st, FHFA, and as a result, they're the regulator of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, all conventional loans now have new pricing adjustments associated with first mortgages. And these pricing adjustments are basically designed to give the lender and ultimately the investor more comfort by way of increased fees on the risk, on assuming the risk of either lending or investing in mortgages. So, there's a variety of factors, and if you were to take this matrix and put it on an Excel spreadsheet, I think it would occupy 81 cells. So put on your reading glasses. And the axis basically has to do with various risk criteria. What's the product? What's the property type? Is it a primary residence? Is it a second home? Is it an investment property? Generally speaking, primary residence are the least risky, because chances are you would default first on your second home and second on your primary residence if things came push to shove. As an example, loan to value, right? The greater the loan to value, all things equal, the greater the risk. Credit score, another indicator. So there's some adjustments, and they can either help the borrower's rate, the borrower's rate and points that they pay at closing, or it can actually it can help them in terms of a credit, if you will, and makes their terms more attractive, or it can hurt in terms of a penalty, for lack of a better word, to their rate and or points that they pay at closing. So it's interesting because there's been a lot of debate on these changes, and they have been in the works, these changes, for a couple years, for what it's worth. There are some on both sides. There's a battle on the political spectrum. A lot of talking heads on cable news were talking about it, saying basically that those who have good credit and pay their bills on time and quote unquote did the right thing for many years will be subsidizing those who have bad credit and did not pay their bills on time and so forth. It's somewhat of a murky analysis. I will say that from my analysis, it does seem that homeowners or borrowers who have higher credit scores will enjoy less of a benefit than they did previously, and those who have less than perfect or less than below average credit scores will be penalized less than previously. We also have to consider, to further muddy the waters, there is a value to the role that the mortgage insurance, the PMI holders play in this equation, because while you may have a borrower that has less than 20% equity and has somewhat of a not great credit score, the investor and the lender does receive protection from the mortgage insurance provider. So FHFA and others have said you have to look at the role the PMI provider plays in this role in offsetting risk, whereas someone who has a low credit score but 20% equity does not have PMI and could be riskier because the mortgage insurance is not in place. So there's that whole equation. But the bottom line is, I think many would agree that it behooves all of us to keep paying our bills on time and have the best credit scores possible, because borrowers with better credit across the board do pay less for mortgages, and I would say other consumer loans than those that do not have good credit scores.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter. I appreciate it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us today for our panel discussion, Vouchers, Subsidies, and SOI. Oh my. We are so grateful to our panelists, Michael Dichiaro, Peter Pagonis, Michael Crane, and Reinaldo Gonzalez, for sharing their time and expertise with us. Throughout our discussion, we explored key topics such as housing assistance, source of income discrimination laws, Section 8 vouchers, and homeownership guidelines. These valuable insights will help realtors and landlords navigate these areas effectively. So thank you for your active participation today and for your thought-provoking questions. Your engagement has enriched our dialogue and contributed to a robust exchange of ideas. As we conclude, let's carry forward the knowledge gained today and apply it to better serve our clients and communities. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.